sometimes, the quietest places hold the loudest memories. Hotels, inns, motels, spaces meant for rest, but filled with the ghosts of those who never left. Tonight, I'll tell you 3 true scary hotel stories, told slowly, softly, just the way you like them, calm, unsettling, and all too real. So, find a comfortable place, dim the lights, and let these quiet walls speak. Our first story begins on a snow-covered road, with a weary traveler and a room that remembers everything. I've stayed in a lot of hotels over the years, but there's one that still lingers in my memory. It happened one winter night, at a quiet old hotel called the Ridgeway Inn. Story 1. The Guest in Room 313. A true scary hotel story. I've stayed in a lot of hotels over the years. Cheap roadside motels, polished chain hotels, and a few charming old places that were once grand but had long since faded. I travel a lot for work, and while most nights blur together, there's one I still think about. It happened in the winter of 2017, at a small hotel in a quiet town in northern Pennsylvania. I was on a long drive home after the conference, too tired to make it through the snowstorm that had rolled in. I spotted the glow of a vacancy sign through the swirling flakes, the place called the Ridgeway Inn. It looked old but welcoming, like something out of another time. I almost drove past it, but something about the soft yellow light spilling from its windows made me pull in. Checking in the lobby smelled faintly of wood polish and something older underneath, maybe dust or age. There was a fire burning weakly in the stone fireplace, and behind the counter stood an elderly man wearing a thick gray cardigan. "Evening," he said with a gentle smile. "Storm caught you too?" I nodded. He slid a form across the counter and handed me a pen. "You're lucky," he said, glancing at the register. "We've only got a few rooms left tonight. 3rd floor, room 313. Elevators at the end of the hall." As I signed, I noticed something odd. Most of the names above mine were written in the same neat, looping handwriting. It looked as if the same person had filled out all the entries. But I didn't think much of it then. I thanked him, took the brass key, an actual key, not a card, and headed toward the elevator. Room 313. The ride-up was slow. The elevator groaned softly as it climbed, the kind of mechanical moan you hear in old buildings that haven't been updated in decades. When the doors opened, the hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit by wall sconces. The carpet was patterned with faded gold and burgundy, worn thin in the center. My room was at the far end. The number 313 was engraved on a small bronze plank, slightly tarnished. I remember thinking it felt heavier than other doors when I pushed it open. Inside, the room was quiet. Still, there was a queen-sized bed with a crocheted blanket folded neatly at the foot, a small wooden desk by the window, and an old-style radiator that hissed faintly in the corner. A framed landscape painting hung above the bed. Mountains, the lake, muted colors. The air smelled faintly of old linens and cleaning solution. I tossed my bag on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, just taking in the stillness. Outside, the wind howled softly, brushing snow against the window. It was peaceful, in that lonely kind of way. The first noise I must have dozed off for a while, because the next thing I remember was waking up to a sound, faint, rhythmic. The soft knock. At first, I thought it came from the hallway, but after a few seconds, I realized it was inside the room. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. I sat up, heart thudding lightly, trying to pinpoint the sound. My eyes adjusted to the darkness. Only the faint orange glow of the heater lit the room. Another 3 knocks, softer this time. I turned toward the bathroom door. That's where it was coming from. I got up, still half asleep, and pushed the bathroom door open. The light was off, but nothing seemed out of place. The mirror above the sink reflected my dim silhouette, tired, confused. I stood there for a few moments, listening. Nothing. Just the low hum of the heater. I shook my head and went back to bed. Old buildings make noise, I told myself. Pipes, heaters, wood expanding in the cold. But as I lay back down, I couldn't shake the feeling that the knocks hadn't been random. They had sounded deliberate. The guest next door the next morning, the snow had stopped, and pale sunlight filtered through the curtains. I went down to the lobby for breakfast, just coffee and toast laid out on a small table. The man at the counter wasn't there. Instead, a woman, maybe in her 50s, sat behind the desk. "Morning," I said. "Quiet place you've got here." She smiled faintly. "It has its days." I asked if many people were staying there last night. "Not really," she said. "A couple on the second floor, and, well, you in 313. I hesitated. "No one in 311 or 315. She looked up at me, a little puzzled. "No. Those rooms haven't been booked in a while." I didn't press further, just thanked her and went on my way. But the thought lingered with me. If no one was in the rooms beside mine, who had been knocking? Night 2 I should have checked out that morning. The weather had cleared. The roads were open. But I had some emails to catch up on, and honestly, the hotel felt comfortable despite the strange moment the night before. So I decided to stay one more night. By evening, snow had started to fall again, and the lobby fire burned brighter this time. The same woman from the morning handed me the key, still 313, and wished me a good night. Back in my room, everything looked just as I'd left it. The blanket folded, the desk tidy. Only the mirror in the bathroom looked different, faintly fogged, as if someone had taken a shower recently. I stood there for a while, staring at the glass. My reflection wavered in the mist, pale and tired. Eventually, I wiped it clean with my sleeve and shrugged it off. Maybe the radiator caused condensation. That night, I left the bathroom light on, just a dim glow to keep the room from feeling so empty. I fell asleep listening to the wind again. Sometime after midnight, I woke to that same sound. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, soft, and steady. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the bathroom. It was coming from the closet. I froze, eyes open in the half-light. The closet door was just a few feet from the bed, slightly ajar. For a long time, I didn't move. I just listened. The knocks came again, 3 times, faint but unmistakable. I sat up slowly, trying not to make a sound. My pulse quickened. I told myself again, old buildings, pipes, drafts. But the rhythm was too deliberate. Finally, I got up and crossed the room. The carpet muffled my footsteps. When I reached the closet, I hesitated, then pulled the door open in one quick motion. Nothing. Just my coat hanging there. My suitcase on the floor. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring into the empty space, half expecting something to move. When I finally closed the door, I noticed something I hadn't before. a thin line of scratches along the inside of the door frame. Faint, like something had scraped against it over and over. I didn't sleep much after that. The housekeeper the next morning, I asked to speak with housekeeping before heading out for the day. The younger woman, maybe in her 30s, came out from the back. She looked tired, her uniform slightly wrinkled. I asked her casually if she ever noticed anything strange about room 313. Her expression changed immediately. She glanced toward the front desk, then back at me. "You're staying in 313?" she asked quietly. "Yes." She hesitated. "They usually don't rent that one out." "Why not?" She lowered her voice. "Because of what happened there. Years ago." I felt a chill move through me. She looked uneasy, like she'd said too much already, but I pressed gently. "They said a woman stayed there one winter, traveling alone. She was found a few days later, in the closet." I swallowed hard. "What happened to her?" "They said it looked like she'd been locked inside. But the door didn't have a lock on the outside. No one ever figured it out." Her eyes darted toward the stairwell. "Sometimes people say they hear knocking from that room that night. From the closet. Like she's still trying to get out." She gave a small, nervous smile, as if to brush it off as rumor, and excused herself. I stood there for a long time, staring at the key in my hand. The last night that evening, I didn't want to go back to the room. I sat in the lobby for a while, scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself. The old man from the first night appeared again behind the desk. "You're up late," he said kindly. "Yeah," I said. "Couldn't sleep." He nodded slowly. "It's an old building. Takes some getting used to." I almost asked him directly about the woman, about the knocking, but something in his expression stopped me. Instead, I just said, "Has anyone ever mentioned strange noises on the third floor?" He smiled faintly. "This place remembers things. That's all." Then he turned and disappeared into the back office. Eventually, I went back upstairs. Room 313 felt colder that night. The radiator hissed, but the air had that heavy stillness again. I left my suitcase packed this time. I knew I'd be leaving first thing in the morning. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closet. The scratches. The faint smell of old wood. I remember whispering, almost to myself, "I'm sorry, whoever you are. I didn't mean to bother you." The room was silent. Then, faintly, from the inside of the closet, knock, knock, knock. I felt tears well in my eyes. Not out of fear, exactly, but something deeper, a wave of sadness, loneliness. I whispered again, "You can stop. You can rest." The knocking stopped. Completely. The air in the room felt different after that. Lighter. I left the bathroom light on again that night, but I finally slept. Checking out when I went down to the front desk the next morning, only the older man was there again. "Checking out?" he asked, sliding the ledger toward me. I nodded. "Thank you for the stay." He smiled kindly. "Hope you slept well." I paused, then said quietly, "Room 313. Has anyone ever complained about noises?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said softly, "Some rooms hold on to their stories longer than others." I wasn't sure what he meant, but I nodded and left it at that. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit me, clean, bright, The storm finally over, I loaded my car and looked up at the third floor one last time. The window of room 313 was slightly fogged, just like the bathroom mirror had been. And for a brief moment, I thought I saw a figure standing there, pale, still, watching. But when I blinked, it was gone. Aftermath. I drove away and never stayed there again. But sometimes, late at night, when I stay in another hotel, one of those quiet chain places off the highway, I still hear things. Little creaks, soft knocks. Maybe it's nothing. But every now and then, I'll wake up certain that I'm not alone. And when that happens, I whisper into the dark, the same words I said that last night at the Ridgeway Inn: "You can rest now." Because maybe, just maybe, she's still checking in. Sometimes, what lingers in a hotel room isn't trying to scare you. Sometimes, it just wants to be seen. Our next story takes us to another quiet inn, this one tucked deep in the snowy countryside. A place where reflections don't always tell the truth. This is the story of the mirror at the Maplewood Inn. Story 2, The Mirror at the Maplewood Inn. I've stayed in many hotels during my years of traveling for work, but none left the same quiet mark on me as the Maplewood Inn. It wasn't famous or grand, just one of those old places you find when you drive too far off the main road, tucked behind a row of winter bare trees and half buried in snow. But I remember every detail of that night. The stillness, the smell of cedar, and the mirror that reflected things it shouldn't have. Arrival: it was February of 2018. I had been driving from Buffalo to Harrisburg, and a blizzard hit harder than expected. My GPS lost signal, and after 2 hours of white roads and zero traffic, I was relieved to spot a hand-painted sign, "Maplewood Inn, vacancy." The building sat slightly back from the road, an old Victorian-style house turned into a bed and breakfast. A yellow light glowed warmly from one window on the second floor. I remember thinking it looked comforting, like it was waiting for someone. Inside, the warmth hit me instantly. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and wood smoke. The front desk was small, tucked into a corner beside a spiral staircase. An older woman appeared from behind a curtain, smiling softly. "Evening," she said. "Rough night to be out." I nodded, brushing snow from my coat. She handed me a pen and a guest book. "You're our only traveler tonight. Most folks don't come through here in winter anymore." Her name tag read Mrs. Halpern. I signed my name, and she slid over the brass key with a small wooden tag. "Room 9. Up the stairs, second door on your right," she said. "Breakfast at 7, if the power stays on." I thanked her and climbed the narrow staircase. The wood creaked gently under each step, the kind of old sound that feels alive. Room 9. The room was cozy, maybe too cozy. The wallpaper was patterned with faded ivy, and a small fireplace sat at the far end, unlit. A four-poster bed stood beneath the lace canopy, perfectly made. But what caught my eye first was the mirror above the dresser. It was large, framed in dark wood, slightly tilted forward as if leaning toward the room. The glass wasn't perfectly clear, it had that old shimmer to it, like a thin mist had settled between the layers. I could see my reflection, soft and dim, and behind me, the shadowed corners of the room. I remember thinking it was beautiful in a haunted sort of way. I unpacked a few things, then sat by the window with a cup of tea from my travel bag. The snow outside felt thick and steady, muting the world into silence. It was peaceful. Until I looked back at the mirror. The first reflection, it wasn't much, just a flicker of motion. I saw it in the corner of my eye, the kind of subtle shift that makes your brain catch up a second too late. When I turned fully, everything looked normal. But something about my reflection seemed slightly off. My face was there, my posture the same, but my eyes looked like they were focused behind me. I turned around quickly. Nothing but the closed door. When I looked back, the reflection had corrected itself. I told myself it was fatigue. My eyes had been strained from driving in the snow for hours. I shook it off and went to bed. The fire in the room stayed unlit. The old radiator hummed softly instead. I fell asleep to the wind tapping gently at the window pane. The whisper sometime after midnight. I woke up. Not to noise, exactly, but to the absence of it. The wind had stopped. The room felt heavy, as if the air had thickened. I lay there for a few seconds before realizing what had woken me, the whisper. Faint. Female. Right by my ear. I couldn't make out the words, just a soft rush of sound, like someone speaking from behind glass. I turned toward the dresser. The mirror caught the faint light from the hallway, reflecting the bed, the curtains, and something else. For a split second, I saw a figure standing near the mirror. A woman, pale, hair falling over her shoulders. Then, nothing. Just my own reflection again. I sat there for a long time, heart pounding slowly but hard, the kind of fear that builds from confusion more than terror. When I finally drifted back to sleep, it was out of exhaustion more than calm. Breakfast conversation in the morning. Mrs. Halpern greeted me with a pot of coffee and quiet smile. "Sleep well?" she asked. I hesitated. "I think so." She chuckled softly. That's not the first time I've heard hesitation with that question. I looked up. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing," she said, waving her hand gently. "This old house has personality. It keeps memories, I suppose. Room 9 especially." She must have seen the look on my face because she added, "Don't let it worry you. It's an old mirror in an old room. Sometimes reflections get confused." I asked her what she meant, but she just smiled and changed the subject to the weather. I left that morning to explore the small town nearby, but her words stuck with me. Reflections get confused. Night. When I came back that evening, the snow had thickened again, and the inn felt quieter than before. No other cars were in the lot. No other guests, as far as I could tell. As I climbed the stairs, I noticed something strange. The air on the second floor was colder. My breath came out in a faint cloud, though the rest of the building was warm. Inside my room, the mirror seemed darker. Not the frame, the glass itself. Like it had absorbed the dimness from the hall. I tried not to look at it as I changed clothes, but my eyes kept drifting back. There was something magnetic about it, like it wanted attention. At around 10 p.m., I turned off the lamp and got into bed, keeping my phone screen dimly lit beside me. The quiet stretched for hours. And then I heard it again. The whisper. Only this time, it came from the mirror. The slow, breathy sound, like someone trying to speak through water. I sat up, staring across the room. The faint shape of my reflection glowed in the moonlight. Then, in the glass, I saw movement again. Not me. Something behind me. A second figure. I turned. Nothing there. But in the mirror, she remained. A woman, her face pale and expression soft, almost sorrowful. Her hand rested gently against the inside of the glass, as if she were pressing against it. The whisper came again, clearer now. It sounded like one word, drawn out. "Please." I remember whispering back, without even realizing why. "Please what?" But she didn't answer. The image faded like breath on cold glass until the mirror showed only me again. A story from the past. The next morning, I found Mrs. Halpern again, sitting near the fire in the lounge. "Can I ask you something?" I said. She looked up from her knitting. "Of course." "That mirror in room 9, where did it come from?" Her hands paused mid-stitch. "Ah. You saw her then?" The way she said it made my chest tighten. She sighed softly and set her knitting aside. "The mirror came with the house," she said. "The inn was once the Maplewood family home. The youngest daughter, Clara, stayed in that room. She used to sit for hours in front of that mirror. People said she believed it showed her things from the other side, faces of those she'd lost." "What happened to her?" I asked. Mrs. Halpern's eyes softened. "She disappeared one winter night. They found her chair overturned, her door locked from the inside. No trace of her was ever found. The mirror was the only thing untouched, except for a handprint on the inside of the glass." The fire popped softly in the hearth. I didn't know what to say. Mrs. Halpern gave a small, sad smile. "Some guests say they hear her. Some even see her reflection. She never harms anyone. She's just still waiting." The final night I could have checked out that day. I should have. But something in me wanted to stay, not out of bravery, but curiosity. A quiet need to understand what I'd seen. That night, I left the lamp on low and sat across from the mirror. I watched my reflection in silence for nearly an hour, waiting. Nothing. Then, just as I started to drift in my chair, the light flickered. Once. Twice. Then steadied again. And in that brief darkness, she appeared. Clara. Closer than before. Her hand pressed to the glass, her eyes filled with something like longing. I stood slowly. "What do you want?" I whispered. She tilted her head slightly, then lifted her hand from the glass and pointed, not at me, but toward the wall beside the dresser. Then she was gone. I walked to the wall, heart steady but heavy, and noticed a faint outline of what might have once been a door, a narrow seam in the old wallpaper, sealed long ago. I don't know what was behind it. I didn't try to find out. But when I looked back, the mirror was different. The glass looked clearer, brighter. And for the first time, my reflection felt like it matched me again. Departure. The next morning, Mrs. Halpern met me at the door as I checked out. "Did you rest better?" she asked gently. I nodded. "Yes. I think she's at peace." She smiled faintly. "I've heard that before, from guests who listen kindly." As I stepped outside, the snow had stopped. The sun broke through thin clouds, turning the inn's windows golden. I glanced up toward room 9 one last time. The curtains moved slightly, though the air was still. Maybe it was just the heat coming on. Or maybe someone was finally saying goodbye. Epilogue. A few months later, curiosity got the better of me. I looked up Maplewood Inn online. The listing still existed. Small, family-run, open year-round. But one detail stood out. Under amenities, it said, "Room 9 unavailable until further notice." There was no explanation. Just that small line, like a quiet secret left untold. and sometimes, when I stay in hotels now, I find myself glancing at the mirrors before bed. Not out of fear, but out of habit. Just to make sure the reflection looking back is really mine. Sometimes the strangest hotel stories don't come from haunted mirrors or whispered names. Sometimes, it's a room that shouldn't exist. The door that was sealed long ago, yet still opens when no one's looking. Our final story tonight takes us to Vermont, to the forgotten halls of the Briarwood Hotel. This is The Room with No Record. Story 3. The Room with No Record, a true scary hotel story. Some hotels stay with you long after you leave, not because of their beauty or comfort, but because of the quiet questions they leave behind. For me, that place was a small, forgotten hotel on the outskirts of Vermont. I stayed there only one night, years ago, yet I still think about it. Not out of fear, exactly, but out of a strange kind of reverence, like I brushed against something I wasn't supposed to see. The place was called the Briarwood Hotel, though you won't find much about it now. It closed down a few years after my visit. And I think I know why. The sudden detour. It was late autumn of 2016. I had been driving from Boston to Montreal, the kind of long trip that starts bright and clear but ends in darkness and fatigue. Around 10 p.m., a thick fog rolled in. My GPS lost signal somewhere between two mountain towns, and my eyes were starting to sting from the headlights of the occasional passing car. I pulled over at a gas station, hoping to find somewhere nearby to rest. The attendant, a quiet older man, mentioned a small hotel about 15 minutes down the road. "It's old," he said, "but clean enough. Briarwood Hotel. Can't miss the sign." He was right. I couldn't. Through the fog, the glow of an old neon sign appeared, flickering weakly. Briarwood Hotel, vacancy. The building was 2 stories high, dark wood with wide windows and a deep porch. The parking lot was nearly empty, just one other car covered in fallen leaves. Something about the quiet appealed to me. I was exhausted and didn't care for luxury, just a bed, warmth, and silence. The lobby inside, the air was still. The faint scent of pine cleaner mixed with old carpet. The front desk sat beneath a mounted clock that ticked loudly in the silence. Behind it was a woman, maybe in her 60s, wearing a dark blue uniform and a polite, unreadable smile. "Good evening," she said softly. "Looking for a room?" "Yes, just for the night," I replied. She slid a form toward me. The check-in process felt almost ceremonial. I noticed the register was thin, only a few names written that week. When I handed back the paper, she scanned it and hesitated. "I'll give you room 217, she said after a moment. "It's quiet. Corner of the second floor." Her tone shifted slightly when she said it, though I couldn't tell why. She handed me a metal key attached to a leather tag. "Elevator's out, but the stairs are to your left." Room 217. The hallway lights upstairs were dim, casting soft yellow pools across the patterned carpet. Everything had that muted hush of a place long unused, not abandoned, but resting. My room was at the far end of the corridor. The number plate read 217, though the paint around it had been scraped, as if the number had been changed more than once. Inside, the room was larger than I'd expected. A double bed with a thick comforter, an armchair by the window, and a small table with a lamp that flickered faintly when turned on. The wallpaper was old-fashioned, pale blue with thin vines winding upward. There was also a door opposite the bed, A connecting door, maybe leading to the next room. It was locked, with an old brass handle that didn't turn. The air felt colder near that door. I unpacked a few things and sat on the bed, stretching my legs. The quiet was comforting. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt, how the stillness almost seemed protective. But that peace didn't last long. The voice it started with what I thought was a radio. A soft, low murmur, as if someone next door had left a talk show playing at low volume. I didn't think much of it until I remembered the front desk clerk saying the hotel was almost empty. I hadn't seen another guest on my way up. I pressed my ear gently to the connecting door. The sound became clearer, not a radio. The voice, feminine, slow, calm. She was speaking, but the words were indistinct, like a lullaby hummed underwater. Then, silence. A few moments later, the knock, from the other side of the door. 3 slow taps. I froze, waiting. My pulse stuttered in my ears. The knocking came again, soft and deliberate. I whispered, "Hello." Nothing. Then, faintly, the voice again. This time closer. "Please, help me." A sleepless night. I stood there for a long time, barely breathing. The air between the 2 rooms felt charged, like static. Then, slowly, I backed away from the door, sat on the bed, and tried to reason with myself. Old hotels have quirks. Maybe there was someone next door. Maybe the sound traveled strangely through the walls. I turned on the TV for background noise, though the picture flickered with static. Around midnight, the power went out. The screen went black. The lamp beside me flickered once, then died. And in that new, heavy darkness, I heard footsteps. Soft, slow, from the hallway outside. They stopped right outside my door. Then, the faint scratching sound. Not at the door this time. At the connecting door. I stared at it through the dim glow of moonlight from the window. The brass handle trembled slightly, not turning, but shivering, as if someone on the other side was trying to open it quietly. I whispered again, barely audible, "Who's there?" No reply. Just the softest whisper in return, "You shouldn't be here." My throat went dry. I sat frozen until the scratching stopped, the silence settling back like a heavy blanket. The morning when I woke up, pale light was leaking through the curtains. The power had returned. Everything in the room looked normal, except the connecting door. In the light, I could see clear marks along the edge of the frame, like fingernail scratches. I packed quickly and went downstairs. The woman at the front desk looked up from her ledger and smiled faintly. "Sleep well?" she asked. I hesitated. "Did anyone stay in the room next to mine last night?" Her expression didn't change. "No, sir. You were our only guest." I frowned. "Then, who's in 219? She looked down at the ledger, her finger tracing the rows slowly, and then she said something that made my stomach drop. "There is no room 219. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "The door right next to mine. There's no 219, she repeated softly. "That section of the hotel was sealed years ago." The closed wing. I followed her gaze toward the end of the lobby, where a faded photograph hung on the wall. It showed the hotel in its early years, brighter, newer, filled with people. "There was a fire in the East Wing," she said quietly. "Happened in 1994. It started in room 219. The woman who stayed there didn't make it out." Her voice softened even more. She was traveling alone. They said she'd come here every November, always to the same room. After the fire, the owners sealed off that section. Room 217 was moved one door down to fill the gap. But some nights, she stopped there, her eyes distant. Some nights, I finished for her. People still hear her. She didn't answer, just gave a slow nod. I left shortly after that, driving back into the fog. The photograph a few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched online for Briarwood Hotel Fire 1994. The article was brief, just a local report. It mentioned a guest named Margaret Lorne, 34 years old, who perished in the blaze. Cause of fire unknown. There was a grainy black and white photograph of her, standing in front of the hotel, smiling gently. What struck me most was her expression. It was soft, kind, and strangely familiar. I realized why after a moment. She looked exactly like the woman I'd seen faintly reflected in the brass handle of the connecting door that night. Pale face, gentle eyes, lips parted as if whispering something. Returned to Briarwood 3 years later, I happened to pass through that area again. Curiosity got the best of me. The Briarwood Hotel was closed, the sign gone, the building quiet and shuttered. But the front porch still stood, and the faint outline of letters could still be read on the wood above the entrance. The door was locked, but through the dusty glass, I could see the empty lobby, the desk, the clock still hanging crooked, stopped at 12:17. The exact time the power had gone out that night. I stood there for a long time in the silence. The air was colder, the kind that carries memories. Then, faintly, from somewhere beyond the walls, a single sound. Knock, knock, knock. Soft, distant. 3 slow taps. I backed away, heart steady but heavy, and whispered into the stillness, "I remember." The wind picked up, carrying dry leaves across the porch, and the sound faded. I left then, and I've never gone back. Epilogue. I've stayed in hundreds of hotels since then. Some fancy, some plain. But I always check the numbers on the doors now. I always listen before I fall asleep. And if I ever hear that slow, careful knock, I don't answer. Because I learned something that night at Briarwood. Not every room that exists was meant to be rented again. Some doors stay closed for a reason. 3 stories. 3 places meant for rest, but filled with memories. Maybe these things don't stay behind out of anger. Maybe it's just loneliness. A trace of something unfinished. So, the next time you check into a quiet room, and the hallway feels a little too still, listen closely. You might just hear a story that isn't finished telling itself. Thank you for listening tonight. If you enjoyed these true scary hotel stories, let me know by leaving a like. It helps me bring you more calm, unsettling tales for sleep. Until next time, sleep well. Stay safe. And remember, sometimes, the walls remember more than we do.